I was watching a YouTube video the other day. It was pretty funny. It was this white male walks around New York City for 10 hours, receives 300 incidents of white privilege. So he's walking, right? And some guy comes out of an office, he says, "Hey, you want a job?" Another guy who's walking, "You want to network with me?" Guy hands him a taco, listen to this music, throws him a football, right? There's a folk philosopher and musician named Utah Phillips. I really like him. And he had something to say about white privilege. He said, if you're born in this world as a white man, then you're armed to the teeth with the weapons of privilege. Now, you may have noticed that I'm a white man. And what Utah Phillips meant was that for a long time as white men, we've been working to be able to have what we want when we want it. That's a very bloody pursuit. It's looked like colonialism, and now it looks like neocolonialism. And they have ways of talking about us in other cultures. They have words for us. In some places, we're a Wendigo, which means a being that lives off the suffering of other beings. And in other places, we're called a hungry ghost, something that eats and eats and eats and can't fill itself. So for about the last 8 years now, about 8 years ago, I moved from being a very comfortable white male and really enjoying that privilege to starting to understand the price that it came at for the rest of the world. Starting to understand the history of how it got to this place of being so privileged. I'm going to tell you some stories today of that process, and then ultimately I'm going to tell you what I'm trying to do about it. Okay. So when I was at university, I got the chance to travel a lot. I got to go on all sorts of expeditions. It's amazing. I got to go to all these beautiful places, and the one expedition I got to go on was a conservation-based expedition. We were going to a conservation area in Borneo, in the rainforest of Borneo, that was run by the Wahea Dayak. And the Dayak are the First Nations people of Borneo. And has anybody ever been in the rainforest? Put your hand up if you've ever been in the rainforest. It's something else. It's just amazing, right? The most beautiful place I'd ever been. And these Wahea Dayak, who were in charge of ensuring that no poaching was going on within the conservation area and that no logging was going on within the conservation area, they started taking us into the rainforest, right? And we'd follow the river, and we'd go all day, and it was amazing. Just a riot of color, and sound, and the birds, all this diversity, all this life, all this vitality. Beautiful place. It's unbelievable. These huge old trees just holding the whole place down, And, it would be lunchtime, and the rangers would pull fish right out of the river, and we'd sit there and we'd eat it right there. It was amazing. It was amazing. And one day they decided to take us to the edge of the conservation area. And they took us all day following the river, and after about half a day, we reached the edge. And it was a hard line, just like that, And on this side was the rainforest and all that life and that vitality, that amazing color and diversity and chorus of birdsong. And on this side was devastation, was clear cut, was just gray, lifeless, noiseless. It was such a contrast. I felt that in my body, I felt so an unbelievable sadness. And I looked at this ranger, right? This man whose entire culture depends on the health of that ecosystem. And he didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Dayak, but we kind of fumbled through it, and I was able to ask, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Where are these trees going? And I had a notebook in my hand, and he pointed at it and said, it goes here. It goes to you. He said, the way that you live is eating the world. From there, I went back to school. I had an opportunity to go on another expedition within Canada this time. It was up to a community called Hartley Bay, which is a Gitgat First Nations community on the northwest coast of British Columbia. And I made a friend there, a fellow named Marvin. Marvin was a wonderful young get-gat man, and he took me to all sorts of incredibly beautiful places, places that were very sacred to him. And he loved the bush. Hartley Bay is pretty remote, right? So they still live from the land, they live from the ocean. They're healthy people. And Marvin, like me, he wanted to take me and show me these places. He'd take me to places you could see the wolves running, He'd take me to places where you could just listen to the ravens chattering all day. Ravens have amazingly complex voice boxes. They can make the craziest sounds you can imagine, right? You just sit there in the bush and you listen to these ravens chattering at each other. It's incredible, right? And he took me to see the spirit bears, which are albino black bears. It's one of the only places in the world you can go to see them. And then he told me about a project proposal called the Northern Gateway Project and the Kitimat Pipeline, which was an idea to make Alberta bitumen from the oil sands accessible to Asian markets by running huge oil tankers through these sacred waters, right? And I'm looking at these fjords and I'm thinking there's no way you can get an oil tanker through there. There's no way there isn't going to be a spill. And I look at Marvin and I say, Marvin, what happens when there's an oil spill? And he says, when there's an oil spill, a way of life will die because the health of our culture is the health of the environment. They're the same. I was really upset. I went back to university and I was in classes and I was looking for answers, and my professors are talking about systemic change through policy reform. Great work that I have tremendous respect for, but it didn't resonate with me, right? And so I started spending a lot of time with Squamish Nation. I was going to school in British Columbia in Squamish. Squamish Nation was the local First Nations group, and spending a lot of time with them. One night, they invited me to a talk that was being given by a fellow named Richard Atleo, who was Coast Salish. He was one of the first First Nations people in Canada to receive a PhD. A really interesting guy. He's just small, and quiet. Not just he doesn't talk a lot, but very still in his body. And he got up there, and it's just a powerful speaker. The whole room sort of vibrates. It was incredible. And I think I was the only white person there. I felt like he was speaking directly to me. I was saying to myself, like, oh my God, I'm seeing all of this devastation as a result of the life I'm living in North America. I'm seeing all of these beautiful places and beautiful people being affected by, me wanting $1.50 notebooks or me wanting cheap gas for my car. Just show me another way to be in the world because I'm born into this. I'm born into this privilege. I don't know anything else. And I swear he was talking right to me. He says, it's very simple. In our culture, we have a value. It's called right relationship. It means that what you take from the earth is within a heart's distance. He meant that when you wanted to eat meat, you killed the animal. When you wanted to cut wood, you cut the trees from the forest where you lived. Everything was within a heart's distance. You felt it. You felt what you took. And what that meant was that the regulation wasn't intellectual, because our minds will rationalize anything. It was emotional, because our hearts always know what's right and wrong. Right? I've got an answer. Okay? But I don't know anything about right relationship. I grew up, in a rural farm country. I don't know about being in the bush. So I did some other things. I needed an opportunity to learn about this. Eventually one came. I got this opportunity to go work in a Northern First Nations community near Timmins, Ontario, with a woman named Elizabeth Babin. She was a Kookum. She was a traditional grandmother. She grew up in the bush. She hadn't been through residential school. She was a ceremony person. She was a traditional person. She was amazing. Never seen so much life in a person, such a light in her eyes, and such a sense of what people need to be healthy and well. Now, traditionally, the grandmothers are the government in Anishinaabe communities because the grandmothers have seen 3 lives. They've seen their own life, they've seen the life of their children, and they've seen the life of their grandchildren, and they know what people need to be well, right? So they're the ones who make decisions in the communities. The chief is a figurehead. They tell him what to tell the people. So a circle of grandmothers had started to resurface in this community. It's called Waugashig, about an hour and a half east of Timmins. And they decided they wanted to start a garden project because produce in northern communities is either inaccessible or unbelievably expensive. It costs so much to get fresh food up there, right? So they wanted a garden, and they'd been running it a couple years, and we got in touch, and she wanted me to run the garden. So I went up there, right? And we're running this garden. And after a couple weeks, we started having a harvest. and we decided that what we're going to do with the produce is we're going to have a weekly lunch. We want to have more interaction with the community, so we're going to have this weekly lunch, right? And the first lunch happens, we harvest everything from the garden, we make a big soup, you know, invite people from the community. And the feedback comes back and says, there's no meat. Right? So, well, that doesn't grow in the garden. Well, you gotta get meat, you know. Okay, so I start going to the elders in the community. I say, can you teach me how to go in the bush? Can you teach me how to hunt? Can you teach me what's in season? No one wants to go with me, right? What's going on? I got a relationship with one elder. His name is Paul Chuckamullen. He's a great guy, you know, old guy. He built a whole house just with his chainsaw kind of guy, you know. He's amazing. One day, I need some boards ripped, right? And he just puts them on his deck. He's got this nice finished deck. And just cuts them up with his chainsaw right there. I'm thinking, Paul, it's a really bad idea. You're going to scratch up your deck. Not a scratch, you know. Anyway, so I go to Paul, and I say, Paul, you know, you're an elder. You've been in the bush all your life. Like, why does no one want to take me in the bush? He says, well, it makes us sad. He says, yeah, we used to go in the bush, and we used to hunt, you know, and you'd kill a moose, and you'd clean that moose, and the organs were medicine. You'd eat different organ meats at different times of year for different medicine. Now you take those organs out of the body of the moose, and it was like a celebration, you know? It was like a clear reflection of the health of the land, the health of the body of that animal. But since the mines have gone in, there's 3 gold mines that have just gone in around that community. So since the mines have gone in, the land's sick, and so the animals are sick. And so when we hunt, and you kill a moose, and you dress it, and you take the liver out, it falls apart in your hands. You see the sickness of the land in the sickness of the body of that animal, and it makes us sad, so we don't go. I'd had it, you know, I'd had enough. There's just too many sad stories. So I go home to Liz's house, and Liz is just waiting there, right? Every time I have an existential crisis, she's always there. She's just waiting, and I'm like bawling, you know, I'm just crying like nobody's business. She says, what are you doing? You know, clean yourself up, you're getting my floor all wet. And sit down at the table. I say, Liz, like, I can't do this, you know, like, everywhere I look, I'm seeing that I'm a part of a kind of privilege, a part of a kind of culture, a part of a kind of society that just is willing to hurt other people, other ways of life, the environment to sustain itself. I don't want it anymore. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. What do? Tell me how to decolonize. Tell me how to not be a part of this anymore. She says, okay, good, let's talk. She says there's 2 things. The first thing you need to know, you need to honor the treaties. We knew you guys were going to make a mess when you got here, right? We knew that was going to happen. We made treaties with you so that we could keep our way of life intact. You didn't honor them. You need to go back. You need to learn those treaties. And as a citizen, you need to start to act in accordance with those. She said the second thing you need to learn is right relationship. What Richard Hadley had taught me about. She said that's not something I can talk to you about. We have to go learn it. So we start spending a lot of time in the bush, me and Liz, right? This is my favorite thing. She adopts me, I become her grandson. The thing I'm proudest of in the world is that I'm Liz Babin's grandson. Yeah, she's something else. Anyway, so doesn't have a lot of mobility. I got this big red prospector canoe from my dad. And it's all lakes up there, right? The Abitibi Lake, they're lake people. So and there's all these rivers connecting everything. So, you know, she gets set up comfortable in the front of my canoe, and I paddle her around, and we go find quiet places, and we just sit in the bush. We just sit there, we don't do anything. She says, you have to learn for this to be enough. You have to learn for what's here to be enough. You guys take, and you take, and you take, and you just need to learn to be able to sit here in the bush as it is, and be satisfied. I'm not very good at this. I get fidgety, I agitate, you know. I want to move, I want to do something. Finally, at the end of my time there, it's moose hunting season. So, okay, we're going out. You moose hunt in the evening when it gets cold, right? So you can call the moose. You make a loop. Liz has like a big horn made out of birch bark, and you make like a sound like a bull moose. And then the other bulls hear it, and they come to have a fight, right? Because and that way you make sure that you get a bull and you don't get a cow who has a baby. Okay. So my girlfriend Kira's with us at the time. She's in the front of the boat. Liz is in the middle, all cozied up, right? And it's the sun setting. And Liz takes us to this place called Lowbush, which is where she grew up. And we're there at Lowbush. And she's pointing out, that's where my cabin was, over there in the bush. And, you know, that's where the Chuck Mullins lived. And she's telling the story. You know. And We get away from the road and up this river, and it's gorgeous. The sun's just coming down. The sky's all red. There's some birds, there's some beavers slapping their tails. It's my spot, bam, you know. And then it gets dark, and the sky goes gray, and then it goes black. It gets cold. The sky opens up, gets clear. Stars, you know. And we're just paddling, no sounds except for the dip swing of the paddle blades, right? And Liz looks back at me, and she says, she looks up at the sky and the stars, and she looks at the stars reflected in the water. She says, "What more do you want? There's nothing else." And for the first time, I had this experience. I just got out of my head, I dropped into my body, and I felt so much love for this place. I just felt the purest love in my heart for the bush, just the way it was. Not in a possessive way. Not like, what can this do for me? How can I use it? But in a free way, you know? Just in a way of appreciation. I love this so much the way it is, you know? It would be so much easier for me to round up all the moose and put them in a little pen and be able to just go get one whenever I need it, you know? But in real love, there's a kind of freedom, there's a kind of allowance. For this to be healthy, it has to be wild. I finally got it. That's right relationship. It's that kind of love for place. When your heart is really involved. When you kill something, it hurts. That's right relationship. So I went through this process, and it started with me realizing that the privileges I have as a white man are privileges that I'm born into, the histories of which and the legacies of which I'm not okay with. It's a hard thing to give up privilege, but I realize now that it's not my time anymore. White men have been at the helm for a while. We made a mess. It's the grandmother's time now. It's the Kookums. They're the ones who understand how to give life, how to nurture life. It's their time. Their time in the driver's seat. And my role is just as a helper, as a shkdewis, as a firekeeper. You know, I cut wood, go to the bush. Kookum keeps me in line, makes sure I'm not getting in any trouble. And she teaches me slowly how to be a healthy man, how to be in the world in a life-giving way. So, out of this whole experience, I've started an organization. It's called Kookum's Helpers. It's an organization that seeks to recreate the experience I was able to have this summer by connecting young people who want to learn right relationship with elders in northern communities who are willing to teach. And they're paid internships. Young people go up and have the opportunity to be up there and work for the Kookums, help them with projects they want to do in their communities. In exchange, they make a wage. And if you want more information on that, you can talk to me afterwards. Thank you very much.